She opened the door like she already knew who it was. Not with surprise, not with the polite distance people usually have when a delivery shows up, but with something slower, measured. Her hand lingered on the doorknob, her eyes holding mine for a second too long, like she was still deciding whether to let me in. "Package for you," I said, my voice a little too steady for how my chest felt. She smiled faintly. "You're early." Her voice was soft, the kind that didn't rush words, like each one had to pass through something unspoken before it reached me. I handed over the small brown box. Our fingers brushed, light, accidental. I told myself not to notice. She told herself it didn't happen. But we both did. The hallway behind her smelled faintly of vanilla and rain, the kind of scent that didn't belong to a house, but to a person. Inside, a lamp threw warm light against the walls, soft and uneven. I wasn't supposed to look past the doorway, but I did anyway. There was a half-drunk glass of wine on the table, an open book, music low enough that I couldn't tell if it was jazz or just the sound of her moving. She didn't close the door. "Come in," she said. "It's raining. You'll ruin the paperwork." It wasn't raining that hard. I hesitated and she noticed, the kind of noticing that feels like being read. Like she could see every thought crossing behind your eyes. "It's fine," she added, a small lift in her tone. "Just a minute." So I stepped inside. The warmth hit first. Not from the room, but from how close everything suddenly was. Her perfume, the soft brush of her sleeve as she reached for the box again. The way her bare feet made no sound on the wooden floor. "You always deliver around this time?" she asked. "Usually later," I said. "You're the first stop today." That explains the punctuality. Her lips curved slightly. "People are never early unless they want to be." I looked down, half smiling, not sure how to answer that. Guess the route was kind to me. Her eyes stayed on me. Quiet, measured. Something about her gaze made it hard to remember the rest of the sentence I was supposed to say, the usual polite goodbye that ended these kinds of visits. She opened the box carefully, using a letter opener instead of tearing it. Inside was a small, wrapped object. Something I didn't see clearly before she closed the lid again. Then, almost to herself, she said, "You know, the real gift isn't in here." I thought she was joking, but she wasn't smiling. "What do you mean?" I asked. Her eyes lifted from the box to me. The air felt too still. "Some things don't fit in packages," she said quietly. "You'll understand." And before I could say anything else, a phone started ringing from the next room. Sharp, sudden, breaking whatever it was that had started forming in the silence between us. She didn't move to answer it, just stood there, her fingers still resting on the box. "You should probably go," she said after a beat. Her tone was soft again, but different, like she'd remembered herself. I nodded, stepping back toward the door. As I reached for the handle, she added, almost whispering, "Next time, don't knock so quickly. I like surprises." The door clicked shut behind me, but I didn't move right away. Outside, the rain had started again. Steady, light. I looked at the box in her hands through the glass pane. She wasn't opening it anymore. She was watching me leave. And I realized, maybe I hadn't delivered anything at all. I told myself it was coincidence, the second delivery. Same street, same building, same door. But it wasn't. She opened it before I even knocked this time, as if she'd been listening for the sound of my steps. "You again," she said, smiling like she'd already forgiven me for something I hadn't done. "Guess I'm lucky," I said. My voice came out lower than I meant it to. Her hair was tied up today, loose strands falling against her neck. The sight shouldn't have mattered, but it did. More than the small envelope in my hand. More than the reason I was there. Inside, her house was the same, warm light, soft music. The faint scent of coffee this time instead of wine. But something in the air had changed, sharper, closer. She took the envelope, then let her hand rest on my forearm just long enough to feel deliberate. "You don't usually talk much, do you?" she asked. "Not supposed to," I said, trying to sound casual. "Good rule. Keeps things uncomplicated." She said it like someone who'd learned that the hard way. I looked around the room at the photos on the wall. A younger woman holding a little girl, both smiling. Then a man in another frame, standing beside her, distant in posture. "You have a daughter?" I asked. "She's grown," she said quickly. "And far away." Silence settled for a beat too long. She added, "Her father too. We were better apart." I nodded, not sure what to say. Something in her tone wasn't sad, just emptied out, like she'd run out of ways to explain the past. When she turned back toward me, she caught me looking at her hands, at how carefully she avoided meeting my eyes. "I'm sorry," I said, though I wasn't sure for what. "Don't be," she replied, a faint smile returning. "Curiosity isn't a sin. Not yet." I laughed softly, but my chest felt tight. She moved closer, close enough that I could feel her breath near my collar. "It wasn't an accident. Neither of us pretended it was. Can I ask you something?" she said, voice quiet now. "Sure. Do people ever notice when you come here?" The question caught me. "You mean, at work?" "At work. In general." She looked away, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "People talk. I don't care what they say," I answered, maybe too fast. That made her look back at me. Really look. Her gaze held mine longer than it should have. Then she stepped back, breaking whatever was starting to form again. "You should," she said softly. "Care, I mean." Her tone said the opposite. She handed me a folded receipt to sign, her fingers grazing mine again. Just a trace of contact, like static. I signed slower than I needed to. When I gave the pen back, she didn't take it right away. Our hands stayed there, barely touching. "Next time," she said, "maybe you'll stay long enough for coffee." "I don't drink coffee." "Then stay anyway." Her eyes flicked down to where our fingers met, then back up. A question she didn't voice, a line neither of us seemed ready to erase. Outside, I left without saying goodbye, but the smell of her perfume stayed on my skin the rest of the day. And for the first time, I didn't want it to fade. The third time wasn't planned. It never is. Her name was written in my route again, and I should have swapped it, easy enough to do. But I didn't. When she opened the door, she looked surprised, like she hadn't expected me this early. A faint smudge of lipstick marked the rim of a glass on the table behind her. Someone else's jacket hung on the chair. "Oh," she said, the word soft, almost caught between breaths. "You're early again. I can come back later." She hesitated. No, it's fine." He just stepped out. The word settled somewhere in my throat and stayed there. I walked in slower this time, aware of everything. The scent of her, the sound of rain outside, the half-buttoned sleeve on her wrist. She closed the door quietly, as if the sound might carry too far. "Friend?" I asked. Something like that. The room felt smaller. My pulse, louder. She moved to the counter, her back to me. "You really don't have to keep bringing these yourself, you know? Someone else could." "I wanted to," I said before I could stop myself. She froze, her hand resting on the counter. "You shouldn't say things like that." "I didn't mean." "You did." Her voice was barely above a whisper now. "That's what makes it worse." We stood there, silence threading the space between us. The air felt charged, like a storm waiting for its cue. Then the front door handle rattled. She startled, glancing toward it. "He's back," she mouthed. Her eyes darted to me. "Go through there." She gestured to the kitchen door leading to the side hallway. I hesitated. Too long. "Go," she whispered sharply. I slipped into the narrow hallway just as the front door opened. Voices. A man's, deep and familiar. The sound of her tone changing. Brighter, lighter, practiced. My heart hammered. I shouldn't have been there. I shouldn't have cared. But I did. I waited, half hidden behind the wall, listening to them talk about dinner plans, a movie, something ordinary that made me feel like a stranger in my own skin. When the man finally left again, the door closing behind him, she appeared in the doorway, her breath uneven, her hair slightly undone. "That," she said quietly, "can't happen again." "I know." She stepped closer, so close I could see the tremor in her fingers as she tucked her hair behind her ear. "You don't," she said. "You think this is what? A game?" Her eyes met mine, and whatever she saw there made her stop talking. Her hand brushed my chest. Just a second. Maybe two. The heat of her palm lingered even after she pulled it away. "Don't look at me like that," she whispered. "How am I looking at you? Like you already know how this ends." I opened my mouth to answer, but she shook her head. Once, slowly, and stepped back. Her breath hitched. Her hand stayed at her side like it didn't trust itself. "Go," she said again, but softer this time. Neither of us moved. For a moment, one heartbeat, one breath too close, we both leaned in. And then she turned away, her voice breaking the stillness. "Please, just go." I did, but the echo of her voice followed me down the hall, and the space between us had never felt smaller. It happened on a Friday evening, right before sunset. The hour when everything turns gold and dangerous. She wasn't on my delivery list anymore. I checked twice. Her name was gone. Someone else had taken the route. But I went anyway. When she opened the door, she didn't look surprised this time. Just tired. The kind of tired that comes from trying too hard to stay reasonable. "You can't keep showing up," she said. "I know." "Then why are you here?" "I don't know," I said, and it was the truth. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It had weight. She stepped aside. "Fine. 1 minute." The room was darker than usual, blinds half drawn. The air thick with the faint scent of rain and her perfume. A candle burned on the table. One of those small ones that make everything feel closer than it should. She was wearing a loose shirt, sleeves rolled up, collar open just enough to make looking away difficult. I didn't. "Are you jealous?" she asked suddenly. I blinked. "Of what?" "Of him. The one who was here last time." I didn't answer, but something must have shown on my face because she gave a small, knowing laugh. "You're too young to look at me like that." "I'm not," I said quietly. Her breath caught. "You don't even know what that means." "I know how I look at you." That stopped her. For a moment, all the space between us vanished. Her hand was on the back of the chair, white-knuckled. Mine was at my side, shaking slightly. She moved first. Not forward, not backward. Just a shift, subtle but enough to pull me with her. "You shouldn't say things you can't take back," she whispered. "Then stop making me want to." Her eyes closed for a second, like she was trying to slow her pulse. When she opened them, she was standing close enough that I could feel her breath against my throat. "This is wrong," she said. "I know. People will talk. Let them." She exhaled sharply, like the sound itself hurt. Then her hand came up, brushing the side of my face. Barely a touch, but it was enough to undo every good intention left between us. Her fingers slid into my hair, her thumb against my jaw. I didn't move, couldn't. "Don't," she whispered again, even as she didn't let go. "I'm not the one moving," I said, voice rough. Her eyes flicked down to my mouth, then back up. The air felt electric. Everything else, time, distance, reason, disappeared. She leaned in until our foreheads touched, the smallest contact in the world, and still it felt like too much. "I can't," she started, voice breaking. Then, from somewhere in the house, her phone began to ring. Neither of us moved. The sound kept going, filling the silence between breaths. Finally, she pulled back, eyes wet, voice almost gone. "Don't come again," she said. "Please." But her hand stayed on my chest a moment longer, pressed there like a secret she couldn't afford to say out loud. And that's how it ended, with her touch, her plea, and a heartbeat that refused to let go. 2 weeks passed before I saw her again. I told myself I'd moved on, new route, new hours, but I still found myself walking past her street, every excuse rehearsed. That afternoon, the light was sharp, the kind that exposes more than it softens. Her door was half open, music drifting from inside. I hesitated. Then I heard my name. "Come in, if you're going to." Her voice calm, but not surprised. She was sitting on the couch, phone in hand, hair loose. The candle from before sat cold and unlit beside her. "I said not to come back," she murmured. "I didn't plan to. Yet here you are." I didn't answer. She looked up finally, her eyes softer than her words. "You always come back when you shouldn't." "I think about you," I said, the words landing heavier than I meant. She blinked, just once. But her fingers tightened around the phone. "You shouldn't say that." "Why not?" "Because I told him." I froze. "Told who?" She looked away. "The man you saw here. I told him about you." My breath caught. "What exactly did you tell him?" "That you were a delivery boy who doesn't know when to stop knocking." It should have stung. Instead, it just landed. I nodded slowly. "That what you really think?" Her jaw shifted. "No," the silence stretched. Then she whispered, "He's not just someone I used to see. He's my ex-husband." I stared at her, the photos on the wall, the jacket I'd seen. It all rearranged itself in my head. "And he still has a key," she added, voice thin. "He still thinks he can walk in. Pretend things are the same." Something inside me twisted. Anger, maybe, or jealousy I didn't want to name. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because it wasn't your business. But I'm standing in the middle of it now." She stood, crossing the small space between us, her eyes fierce and unsteady all at once. "Don't make this into something it's not." "What if it already is?" Her breath caught, and for the first time she didn't look away. "You think you're saving me?" she said, stepping closer. "But you're just reminding me what it feels like to want something I shouldn't." Her hand brushed my arm. Not gently, not carefully. The contact was sharp, electric. I felt it all the way up my spine. "You're shaking," I said quietly. "So are you." We were too close again, both knowing it. The air thickened, the world narrowing to a point. Then her phone lit up, his name flashing across the screen. Neither of us moved to answer. Her breath trembled. "He knows you're here." "How?" "I told him not to come today, which means he will." I looked toward the door, then back at her. "What do you want me to do?" She hesitated, then stepped even closer, her voice a whisper against my collar. "Stay." The word landed like a match in a dry room, and before I could think, she pressed her hand to my chest again. The same spot, the same pressure as before, but this time, she didn't pull away. The knock came harder than expected. 3 sharp hits that rattled the frame. She froze. Her hand was still on my chest. I could feel her heartbeat through her palm, frantic and uneven. "That's him," she whispered. I didn't move. "Then let him knock." Her eyes darted to the door, then back to me. "You don't understand, he doesn't like." The knocking came again, louder this time. "Open up, Claire." Her name spoken like a claim. It hung in the air between us, bitter and heavy. I reached up, gently curling my hand around her wrist. "You don't owe him anything." Her lips parted, breath trembling. "You should go." But she didn't move to open the door. The air between us felt electric. Every inch, every shallow breath alive with the tension neither of us had language for. "Why'd you tell him I was just some delivery boy?" I asked quietly. "Because it was easier than admitting what I wanted." She said it so softly I almost missed it. Outside, the footsteps faded. Maybe he'd left. Maybe not. It didn't matter anymore. She turned back to me, close enough that I could see the small crease between her brows, the one that appeared whenever she tried not to cry. "This can't keep happening," she said. "But it is." "I'll ruin you," she whispered. "You already did." That made her laugh, small, shaky, a sound somewhere between relief and surrender. She reached up, brushing my hair back from my face with trembling fingers. "You're too young to mean things like that." "Maybe," I said, "but I still mean them." Her hand stayed there against my cheek. Neither of us blinked. The rain outside started again, soft against the windows. That same sound from the first night I met her. Her body leaned forward before her mind did. Our foreheads touched, the same fragile contact as before, but this time it didn't stop there. Her breath mixed with mine, the space between words dissolving. "You can still walk away," she whispered. So can you. We stood there, the moment stretching, the air too warm to breathe. And then she exhaled, long, shaking. Final. No, she said. Not this time. She leaned in, slow, hesitant, not rushing, not claiming. Just closing the distance that had been holding us hostage for weeks. Her lips barely brushed mine, soft enough to still be a choice. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't clean. But it was real. When she pulled back, her eyes were wet again. But she didn't look away. This will cost us, she said. I know. She smiled faintly, tired but lighter somehow. Then maybe it's worth something. Outside, the rain softened. Inside, the silence finally felt like peace instead of punishment. We stood there, neither moving, both knowing the same truth, that whatever came next, we had already crossed the line together. Not an ending, a decision. Morning came quieter than either of us expected. The storm had passed sometime before dawn, leaving the house wrapped in that pale gray light that softens everything. Mistakes, promises, even people. She stood by the window in one of his old shirts, sleeves rolled up, watching the world dry itself off. Her hair was loose, tangled from sleep. She looked different like that. Not untouchable, not older, just real. I sat on the couch, watching her the way you watch something you're afraid to disturb. When she finally turned, she smiled. Small, tired, but honest. You're still here. You told me to stay. I didn't think you would. Neither did I. The space between us wasn't charged anymore. It just felt calm, like whatever needed to burn had burned through the night. She walked over slowly, barefoot, the floor creaking under her weight. When she reached me, she hesitated, the same way she always did before crossing a line. Then she sat beside me, close enough that her shoulder brushed mine. I used to think wanting something like this made me foolish, she said. That it meant I'd learned nothing from before.
Ich glänzte her.
And now, she breathed out a laugh, low and quiet. Now I think it just means I'm still alive. I didn't have an answer for that. I just reached over and took her hand, unsure at first, then certain when she didn't pull away. Her fingers fit around mine, warm, steady. You'll get tired of people looking at us, she said after a while. Wondering why, how, what it means. Let them wonder, I said. She tilted her head toward me, eyes soft. You really think it can be that simple? No, I said. But I think it can be worth it. She smiled again, this time with something like relief behind it. Then she leaned in, resting her forehead against mine. Not to start something, just to be close. The kind of closeness that doesn't need to prove anything. For a long time, we didn't speak. The rain outside had stopped completely, but drops still slid from the roof in slow rhythm. Finally, she whispered, I don't want to be careful anymore. You don't have to be. Her hand tightened around mine. A small, quiet promise. No declarations, no grand endings. Just two people sitting in a room that had finally stopped feeling haunted. When she kissed my forehead, it wasn't desperate this time. It was gentle, an answer instead of a question. We stayed there, leaning against each other, the sound of the world moving on outside. And for once, neither of us needed to. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?